For coming to the Cary Institute. I'm Josh Ginsberg. I'm the president of the Cary Institute. And when I got here a couple years ago, this is quite loud. See if that helps. Yeah, can you still hear me in the back? Yeah. When I got here a couple years ago, I felt that this auditorium, which despite its brutalist architecture, which is not everybody's cup of tea, I thought it was a wonderful space. And one of the things I really am pleased about is we increasingly are using our space as a community resource. And so co-sponsoring this workshop with, I want to make sure I read it because otherwise I'll forget somebody, the Dutchess Land Conservancy, the Columbia Land Conservancy, and the American Farmland Trust, that wasn't hard, is a real honor because they are three great institutions that do phenomenal work on the subject. The Cary Institute is an ecosystem science center. We study the processes that support life on Earth. That's my very short elevator pitch. I won't give you more. Freshwater, forests, disease ecology, and urban ecology. And we study the way in which these things support us, as well as every other creature on Earth. But the application of that work is part of our DNA. In many scientific areas, people talk about applied and pure research. Nobody around here distinguishes between research, good research, and bad research, yes. Applied and theoretical, no. We view good research as something that's important for society. So taking that knowledge and taking knowledge generally and helping people use knowledge to do better is a core part of our mission. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to have you all here. It's a great turnout, particularly on a beautiful, autumn, early winter, depending on how you look at it, Saturday afternoon. I hope this will be engaging, informative, and uplifting, and welcome to the Cary Institute. I will now hand over to Becky Thornton. Becky is director, president, head of, unusual, head of the Dutchess Land Conservancy. For those of, because she won't sing her own, tune her own horn. For those of you who don't know DLC, DLC is a local land conservancy that has done remarkable work at preserving vast stretches of Dutchess County and has really been a model, I think, for land conservancies around the region. When they started, there wasn't all that much land under conservation in Dutchess County. There is now...
We have
40. Right, but 40,000 acres is a lot of land. This side of the Hudson, for somebody who grew up mostly on the other side of the Hudson, this side of the Hudson is different. The Catskills, the Adirondacks, they're all big state parks. Massive land areas, New York City, New York State, well protected. This side of the Hudson is special and beautiful because of the private lands. Right? And those private lands are conserved not because the state does anything about it, because of what you do and places like DLC and the Columbia Land Conservancy do. So it's a pleasure to have you. We're handing off mics.
Hold this.
You may do whatever you like.
So I thank you, Josh. Now I don't have to say anything about DLC because you gave us such a wonderful introduction. So DLC has been around for about 31 years now, and as Josh said, most of our work is with private landowners to protect their land. We have a very active program where we work with farmers to purchase the development rights on their properties, and also, a number of years ago, we decided we wanted to be a little bit more proactive to try to figure out ways to keep farmers on the land because of land prices being so high and young farmers having, struggling to be able to get on, find a way to get onto farms. So we were looking at doing a farmer match program, but found that our partners, our sister organization to the north, CLC, had already had a wonderful program in place. And after talking to them, they nicely came to us and said, would you like to team up with us and have a joint program? And so we're thrilled that over the past several years, we have a joint farmer match program that is run by great team at CLC, one of who is Marissa Cody, who I'm going to introduce now, who can tell you more about that. And it's kind of led to these workshops that we hold, and we're thrilled to be a partner today with the Cary Institute as well as AFT. And with that, I'll turn it over to Marissa.
Hi, so I'm Marissa with the Columbia Land Conservancy. I'm the director of our conservation program, so I oversee our variety of different land protection tools that we use. I think you all know Columbia County is a county north of here. So we work closely with Dutchess Land Conservancy, as Becky said, both in Columbia and Dutchess County. With the match program, most of our other work is primarily confined to Columbia County, our land protection work. We're a pretty broad organization. We work with landowners to privately protect their land. We've protected about 26,000 acres, I think. We own a number of properties that are available for public recreation and education. We work with municipalities to think about their planning and ways to work with their communities. And then we have our agricultural program, which is what brings all of you here today. So we started the match program that Becky mentioned back in 2008 with the understanding that this was a role that land trusts could play. As a land trust, we know a lot of landowners around the community who are interested in making their land available for farming. Knew a lot of farmers, particularly through our work in farmland protection. So like Dutchess Land Conservancy, we work with a lot of farmers to protect their properties. And so this was kind of a role that land trusts and conservation organizations could play in terms of keeping land in production. We took the position that if land is not being, or if land is in active production, it's a lot less likely to be developed and is being put to a good use. And so we started that program in 2008. We joined forces with Dutchess Land Conservancy in 2013. And so the program has continued to grow and expand. We recently were able to hire Terrence. Where are you hiding? Terrence is over there, up at the top. So Terrence is new on our staff, and he's primarily taken the lead for organizing this workshop. You may have heard from him. Terrence is doing a lot of our day-to-day management of our match program these days. And we also are part of a broader network called the Hudson Valley Farm Link Network. And Tim Bello is here to talk with you about the American Farmland Trust. We're very pleased to have this new broader umbrella organization helping farmers access land and helping landowners find the right types of farmers for their properties.
Thank you. My name is Tim Bello. I work with American Farmland Trust. So if you've heard of American Farmland Trust, we're a national organization, but we have regional and state offices. Our New York office is up in Saratoga Springs, and all of my work is concentrated on a project called the Hudson Valley Farm Link Network, where we work with Dutchess Land Conservancy and Columbia Land Conservancy, some of the cooperative extension offices here in the Hudson Valley, some of whom you'll be hearing from today, a number of other organizations up and down the valley. And most of our work, we did bring some brochures, and I think they're in the packets that you got. So I'll just say something briefly about it, but just know that there's more information in here, and you can always reach out to me both today but also after the workshop. Most of our work in the network is focused on working with farmers and farmland owners to try to ensure that farmland stays available for agriculture now and into the future. So sometimes that's through farmland conservation practices, but in a lot of cases that's also through working with people who own farmland, who aren't farmers themselves, and who can make secure leases or other opportunities, management or otherwise, available to farmers here in the Hudson Valley. Certainly access to land is one of the biggest barriers for farmers who are getting started, but also established farmers who are looking to grow. So it's really exciting to see so many people in the room who are interested in learning more about the considerations that go into a farmland lease, because there are many, and it is complicated. At the same time, it is in many ways about building a good relationship and about understanding your needs and their needs and being able to communicate about that. Thankfully, there are a lot of people in the Hudson Valley, many of them are in the room, who are available to help walk through that process, who are available to come out and visit to help think through some of the personal steps and personal considerations, as well as some of the land-based considerations and some of the relationship building and legal contractual considerations that are wonderfully in the mix. So it's exciting to be here. It's exciting to see so many people, and please feel free to ask me any questions afterwards if you want to come on up. And I'm looking forward to hearing the kinds of questions that get brought up to the presenters and the panelists. So thank you for having me.
And I realized I forgot to introduce our director, Peter Payton, who's up there also. So he's the director of the Columbia Land Conservancy. Before I introduce our next speaker, I thought it might be helpful to just remind everybody what's the purpose of this workshop and why we're here. So So the programs that we do for farmland leasing, we spend a lot of time talking with farmers, talking with landowners about what it is that they want, what are their goals. And as part of our overall role in helping people come to good relationships and getting farmers on the right properties, there's a very large educational component. So there are a lot of farmers that we work with that may not really understand sort of what's involved in starting out these businesses, and we found that there are a lot of landowners who are really enthusiastic, perhaps like yourself, enthusiastic about putting your land to good use, putting your land into production. There's a lot of different types of farming activities out there, a lot of terms thrown around, and it's hard to get a good grasp as to what does all this mean. What type of farming is right for me? Do I need organic farming? Do I want to support my local dairy farmer down the street? What's going to be the right fit for me or for you? And so what we really want to try and accomplish through this workshop is to get a better understanding of what is the broad picture of farming in the Hudson Valley, in our specific regions. Why do the different types of farm operations do what they do? Why do they grow corn, or why do they grow hay, or why are they organic, why are they not organic, and what do all these terms mean? And so our next speaker, Will Yandick, is going to try to talk with you a little bit about that. Will is a fourth-generation farmer who has a fruit and vegetable operation up in Livingston, which is the southern part of Columbia County, and is going to talk with you a little bit more about all of these terms that you might hear thrown out there, GMO, CAFO, kind of what do these terms mean, so that we can come to a broader understanding of, once you understand them, then you can start thinking about what types of uses might be appropriate for you, or at least better understand why the farm community operates in the way that it does.
Thanks, Marissa. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. I farm in Livingston. It's 180 acres that has been in my family. This is our 101st year. And a wonderful thing has happened to agriculture here in the Hudson Valley in my 38 years. In the 80s, when I was a kid, my father and many farmers like him told kids like us, get the hell out of farming, there's not a lot of opportunity there. And I am so happy to have lived through the last few decades to see not only is that statement patently untrue, but the Hudson Valley has become and is becoming a real laboratory for a great diversity of agricultural practices. We live in one of the oldest farmed regions in the country, not only because farming began here with colonial settlement sometime in the 1600s, but in fact Native Americans were farming this area for thousands of years before that. And so when we think of farming, it's not just an economic activity as important as it is to our local economy. It's a real part of the history and fabric of this region, not only for the ecological opportunities that it provides, but also a sense of place, a place that we're proud of. I think that the Hudson Valley is one of the most beautiful parts of the world. And when we think about the beauty of this region, farming and the landscapes of farming are such a critical part of that. So I'm very pleased to see so many people here interested in continuing that tradition. I often preach to anybody that will listen that we are really unique in the Hudson Valley because of the diversity of farming that we see here. Not only in the great number of crops and practices that we use here, but the range of types of farming that are organic and sustainable, inventive forms of regenerative farming, and I'll get to that in a second. But very briefly, what are some of the main reasons that a farmer from a farmer's perspective would want to enter into a lease agreement and get onto a piece of land? There are established farmers who are looking to expand their operations that have commodity crops. Their primary costs are already locked up into their machinery, and they're simply looking for more land in order to make good on that investment. That can be row crops such as corn and soy, or more haylands that can be sold as a commodity, and so forth. There's also, as alluded by the previous speakers, a great critical need for young people to get onto farming pieces of property. We've often heard statistics across the country that our farmers are aging out. Here in New York, the average age of our farming community is in the upper 50s, approaching 60. But there are young people who want to farm again. The challenge is that places like the Hudson Valley land values are high, and that's where you folks can come in, some of you who have land, that can offer an opportunity as a kind of incubator for young farmers to get onto that piece of property. The third other value that we have on farms in this district is our proximity to New York City and its food markets. We live a few hours away from the largest domestic food market in the country. And there's a price that we pay for that in the high value of our lands, but it also, the great opportunities in the markets that are in New York make a wide range of farming possible in this district. And what are some of those types of farming? I think we all hope that any type of farming that we do in the Hudson Valley is sustainable. That's a very vague term. It's often easier to describe what is unsustainable than to describe what is sustainable. And we hope that all types of farming look at soil as its primary resources, because in the scan of a human lifetime, soil is a non-renewable resource. Okay? And when it's gone, it's gone. We're very lucky in the Northeast that our soils have taken a beating over years of sometimes unsustainable farming practices through the 19th century, and we're able to bring those soils back through certain practices, and there are people in this room that can connect you to agencies and resources in this community to help you build up some of those soil resources. When we look at farming, it's often one of the first break in the flow chart is whether or not it's organic or conventional. Okay? Many of you have heard the term organic, but I think what surprises many individuals is that organic does not mean that there isn't a spray regime for some of the crops. What do I mean by that? Well, if you were growing apples, for example, there are organic sprays that are available that are lower in toxicity that can be sprayed on that product in order to get a marketable crop. There are things such as copper sulfate, which is a lower toxicity fungicide that's sprayed on organic crops. So if some of you enter into a lease agreement and you see some spraying activity going on, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's not an organic practice. Within the subsets of organic, there's both certified and non-certified organic. So for certified organic practices, there is a whole series of steps that the farmer goes through to make sure that they can stamp the word organic, which is a highly regulated term, on their products with the hope that that branding will enable them to fetch a better price for their products than had they not had it. But there are a number of farmers in this region that have, for various reasons, determined it's not in their best economic interest to go through that process, but still adhere to the basic principles of organic farming. We call that uncertified or non-certified organic. Within organic farming, there's also a subset. Many of you might have heard the term biodynamic farming, okay, which is a type or subset of organic farming that, in addition to adhering to all of the USD guidelines, which is a very firm definition of organic, they attempt to continue the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, who was a writer and an agronomist that was really one of the first organic waves in this country in Europe in the 1920s, that has a whole subset of additional practices that they do in addition to organic farming. Among conventional growers, there are a wide range of practices. And so I think if you have a farmer that's approaching your piece of property that is not organic, I think that many progressives have been taught to think if it's not organic, it's bad. But it bears investment of your time to understand what those practices may be, because it's certainly possible for a conventional farmer to be sustainable, to treat the landscape in a way in which soil resources and the water resources and ecological resources are not adversely harmed to a degree that will diminish the biodiversity or quality of those resources on the land. Many of you might have heard of farming practices that involve GMO crops. GMO obviously stands for genetically modified organism. And the very principle is simple, that the code of life, genetics, the 4 nucleotides that make up every cell and protein in our body of all living things, all read the same language. So you can take a gene from one organism and place it into the genome of another organism, and the cells of that organism will not be able to differentiate those 2 genes. And the ribosomes, the fancy word in the cell of that new organism, will continue to read that gene and express it. So what do we mean by, what's an example of that? There are scientists in the early parts of this research that have taken a gene from a noctilucent jellyfish, a jellyfish that grows in the dark. And if you take that gene and put it into another organism, that organism can express that gene. So now we have researchers throughout the ages that have made glow-in-the-dark frogs and glow-in-the-dark cats. And the reason that happens is because those genes are the same language of life that can be read over and over again. So the same concept is used in crops for wide and varying purposes. The two most common that you're going to see on farms here in the Hudson Valley are herbicide resistance. So there's a gene that is inserted into the genome of, for example, corn, so that that corn will be resistant to herbicides. Now, why in God's earth would a farmer want to do that? It has to do with the regime of growing a crop. So if a farmer plants a GMO brand of corn, then the farmer can plant that corn. Corn grows up along with all the weeds around it. The farmer sprays that field with herbicide, and that herbicide will kill everything except for the corn, which contains that gene which is resistant to that. There are also brands of corn which have a kind of pesticide inside the genome so that if a bug bites into that corn, that farmer will not have to spray pesticides in order to have that pesticide resistance. Those are the two most common examples of GMOs that you're likely to see here in the Hudson Valley. There is ongoing research to expand that, but at the time being, you're very likely to see less than those two examples. What else? Another term that you might encounter is IPM, or Integrated Pest Management. And this is kind of a midpoint between conventional and organic. In IPM regimes, rather than spraying according to a fixed calendar, it's the 3rd of May, therefore I have to spray, the farmer goes out to the crop, surveys the damage, and makes sure that whatever pests or fungi are on the crop meet a kind of economic damage threshold. If it does, they might administer a fungicide or a pesticide. If it does not, they'll simply not spray. And this is very dependent on weather. And we don't think of ourselves as living in one of the very wettest parts of the country, but we are. You take a look at a map of the globe, the areas that are green are relatively few. And we're one of them. And that is a tremendous resource for us. Because even under all climate change scenarios, this seems to be a part of the world in which we will continue to have water. The price of that water is that we live in a part of the world that has a lot of fungi and pests. And so we have to work creatively as farmers across the spectrum of options to be able to work with our natural environment to make sure that we are growing marketable crops that are free of insect and pest damage without ruining our soil and water and other resources here on the land. There's no substitute for talking with the potential farmer that you might be entering into a lease with. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that organic is always good and conventional is always bad. Try to dig a little bit deeper and try to understand what their plans are for the land and how that fits into your interests. It can be argued that perhaps a 5,000-acre farm that grows lettuce in California that's certified organic may not be using water resources in a sustainable way. The flip of that is that you can have a non-organic farmer right here in the Hudson Valley that's not certified organic, but might be just using a very small, judicious use of herbicides once in the year and otherwise using very ecologically sound principles. So that's my pep talk. As you talk to farmers, try not to simply use labels that you might have heard in popular media, but work hard with the farmer to understand what their intentions are and try to be as open-minded and as flexible as you can. Because as the Young Farmers Coalition has often found, one of the most critical resources that we need to get another young generation onto the land is simply access to that land. So thank you for your time, thank you for your interest, and if you have questions later on, we can put you in touch with the proper resources. Thank you.
So first of all, apologies for the technology in the background. Being a scientist, I'm unable to talk without a PowerPoint, which is only partially true. Anyways, what's that?
You can't follow it, that's it.
It's I'm not going to even go there. Let me just open it up. Good, that's good. There we go. And we say you. Lovely. All right. The first thing I have to know is that I'm a wildlife biologist who has spent 30 years being a conservation biologist, particularly looking at the conservation of mammals, large mammals, all over the world. It's odd they hired me to run an ecosystem science institute, but so be it. When I saw the title, I panicked, and then I did what I do when I panic, which is change the subject. All right, and so, why is it doing that? There we go. So I'm going to talk about something related to soils, but I'm not a soil expert, I'm not a nitrogen expert, but fortunately I know manganese. Several people, in fact, men and women at the Carey Institute. So this talk was put together with, I would say, good knowledge of the subject from many, many people, and this is sort of my coming out as an ecosystem scientist, so tell me how I do. I want to talk to you about nitrogen, and I want to explain why we care about nitrogen. Right? Nitrogen, of course, it's in ammonium, it's in fertilizer, it's in poop, it's in lots of things, in fact, everything that lives. But it's also, if you look at estuaries, particularly sort of the end point where streams go to rivers, rivers go to the sea, it is the single greatest cause of eutrophication or biological death in shorthand, and it's the greatest pollution problem in marine waters, coastal marine waters. It's not an insignificant problem in lakes. It's not an insignificant problem in streams and rivers. I just was looking at the end point. It increases the acidity of soils and waters. It has a direct impact on human health, particularly through particulates and ozone. You hear a lot about ozone, but ground ozone really is not good for your health, and it's related to nitrogen. It's also related to forest health, both through forest acidity, think acid rain, something the Carey Institute has been involved with through our first president, Gene Likens, since the beginning of study of acid rain, and it affects our drinking water and particularly groundwater contamination. Right, so nitrogen is a really important nutrient. It's an important pollutant. In the old days, before we really were in a period of geological time that scientists are now calling the Anthropocene. It's the period of geological time when we have altered the Earth to the extent that we can name it. When that started in the Industrial Revolution of the 60s, it was lightning strikes and fixation by microorganisms. I'll talk a little later about things like nitrogen-fixing legumes, bean family. But there were very few sources, and there were fluxes in the atmosphere, in the way it was taken up by plants, and then there was runoff, and denitrification occurs through bacterial processes. Right, so that was the simple world we used to live in. And in the Anthropocene, right, there are all these different sources of nitrogen. And it's coming from fertilizers, it's coming from power plants, it's coming from food, right? When we bring food into a system and then we consume it and the waste that come out of it. And if you want to look at the impact, one way to do it is sort of big, broad scale. So if you look across the country, 2/3 of the estuaries are impaired, right, by nitrogen. About 40% of those at a high level, about 25% of them at a moderate level, 35% not too bad, but we still see eutrophication and problems with nitrogen influencing these estuary systems around the country. Right, we can get a little more local, because I like that, and thank you to Stuart Finley for giving me this paper. Anthropogenic nitrogen sources and relationships in riverine nitrogen budgets, right, or export, right? Simply to say, how does nitrogen move through systems? And rivers are great because they capture it all. And what I loved about this study is they looked at various inputs. They didn't look at the outputs. They tried to study nitrogen by what we put into the system. And farming is one of the places we put it in. But interestingly, we tend to focus on animal waste and human waste in terms of manure and sewage when we're thinking locally about nitrogen. But the brilliance of the study was they looked at lots of different forms of nitrogen, recognizing that the more you put in, the more you get out, and the more you get out, the more problems you have. And they said, okay, what are the major sources across all these different northeastern watersheds? And so if we go to Hudson, the Connecticut River are there. But basically, the key issue was that for many drainages, it was food that we brought in for ourselves and for our livestock. And that was the major source. There's not a lot we can do. We actually export food from here, so that's in terms of nitrogen balance, not a bad thing. But in terms of bringing food in for our livestock, it's really important to realize that livestock production and agriculture and application of fertilizers is what brings the nitrogen into most of our systems at the highest level. It's no longer natural causes, it's agricultural and net import for food and feed. Right? So that's just a setup to say it's a problem. Now, what are the impacts? I'm a person who really likes to do what I used to call Ronald Reagan ecology, right? Which is to use an example as a way of talking about the general. Ronald Reagan was very good at that. He would start with the general and then say, I talked to a man in Utah. I want to talk to a man named Dave Strayer. Many of you may not know Dave, but Dave is now a member of our scientific staff. Dave has spent 30 years working on the Hudson, but particularly is passionate about freshwater mussels. And the Hudson and Connecticut River valleys are some of the centers of diversity of freshwater mussels. It's a very special thing. About a month after I got here, Dave and I put on waders and went sloshing around the 10-mile river. And he picked up a mussel and literally threw it at me, and I caught it. He said, how old do you think that mussel is? I said, about that big, big wool, right? Something that you would eat and there'd be a lot of meat on it. And I said, I don't know, 10 years? He said, 75. He said, I marked that mussel 22 years ago. Right? And he said, and the problem is that we're not getting a lot of new mussels. And we are getting local extinction and soon species level extinction of mussels because of nitrogen. Right? And so what this graph sort of shows is at a fairly low level of ammonia, you stop getting mussels, young mussels in the system. And the reason for that is that with a fairly low level of ammonia, you stop getting breeding, right? And you just don't get what we call recruiting. You don't get new mussels added to the system. Now, the good news is they live a very, very long time, so that you have multiple chances to remediate the problem and get new mussels in there. The bad news is we're not there yet. We're doing better. And I think a lot of the alternatives that we'll talk about in terms of sustainable agriculture from the perspective of the ecosystem rather than from the purely economic perspective, can we make a living into the future, right? I'd argue the two are linked. Mussels are a great example of that. There are many other examples. So what can be done about nitrogen? This is sort of the more applied piece. And I sort of bring this up because it is a metaphor. We'll talk about organic, non-organic, and why that's not always a great differential. High impact, low impact. Various kinds of farming have different impacts. And nitrogen is a really fun thing to do because you can actually do things about it. Right? So you can engineer the riparian zone. So one of the ways that nitrogen enters the system is through streams. Right? Those classic 19th century Hudson River School paintings, I looked for one, I didn't get it in time, of cows standing in the stream. Not good. Right? Not good at all. Because the stream has no trees around it, it has no vegetation, it has no undergrowth. There are problems with covering undergrowth because of deer. Gary Institute property, we've been hunting them for 40 years, that solves the problem. Right? It's a predator-prey problem. I had to get wildlife in there somewhere. But so you can restore your streams, and restoring them is really important. Fencing them is not an unimportant act. Cows, goats, and sheep are really good at walking, and they're good at burrowing through vegetation and getting to streams. Why not? So fencing and restoration are a piece of that. Right? You can create artificial drainages that are managed so that you get substrates that then filter through a natural vegetation boundary. But again, this isn't necessarily cheap. Right? It's better not to destroy the system to begin with. You can restore wetlands. Wetlands are a really great way of reducing nitrogen flows into the broader system. We restore wetlands. Obviously, the best thing to do is even if you legally can drain a wetland, don't. Right? Work around it, figure out what to do with it, or enjoy it. Right? But fundamentally, wetlands are another good way to do it. There are programs that help you pay for wetland restoration. There's long-term investment in our land, I think, is the most important thing. I talk to friends who have properties that they want farmed, and they talk about ag exemptions and reducing their taxes as part of that, and that's fantastic. Conservation easements, another way of reducing your outgoings. I think you need to think about investing some of those savings in the long-term health of your land. Right? And I like to think of this as, if we can find ways for everyone to work together, everyone will win. The people in the city will get great food. They'll get great food. I love living up here. But also, we'll get sustainable landscapes where our kids and their kids, at least from the perspective of our local actions, which I think these days are the most important, right? We'll be doing this in a sustainable manner. So don't think of it as, throwing money away. It's actually investing money in your property. The Farm Bill, right, whatever we do when we reauthorize the Farm Bill in 2019, there are huge subsidies in there. And again, what we can do is try and convince our legislative representatives to do a better job of getting our interests represented, not just people in Kansas with big cornfields. There are environmental programs, specifically $55 billion of environmental programs. And if you look at them, there are a whole lot of different programs. I'm not going to go through them all because that's why I put so many on the screen, so I don't have to. Right? But fundamentally, there are ways to mitigate costs and do the right thing. I think working with land trusts is clearly one way. Working with farmers who recognize that they're getting a real benefit from the land. You're getting a benefit by seeing your land in production. We're getting a benefit by not developing it. And some of that benefit can also be put into long-term sustainability. All right, I wanted to do one other thing because I knew Will and others were going to talk about organic. And there is a perception out there that organic is not economic and it reduces your productivity. So I thought I'd look at the science and see what that said. Paper by a woman named Catherine Badgley and another one, Yvette Perfecta. And it turns out, of course, the world being a very small place, Catherine Badgley, otherwise known as Badger, was my TA at college. Right? And she published this paper about 10 years ago looking at the data on renewable agriculture and food systems and organic culture, agriculture particularly. Is it sustainable? And the answer is maybe. But what's interesting is we could, and this has been now, I went back to the first paper I could find on this, but there's been more work done on this. We could feed the whole world. We could grow enough calories. As we eat today, that doesn't mean as we eat tomorrow, because people in India quite rightly want to eat more meat, and they like a richer protein diet. But it's not impossible to think that organic agriculture would work. Nitrogen-fixing legumes, right, green manures as they're called, and that's a picture of some beans down there to remind me to say beans, and other legumes, right, can do as good a job as applying artificial fertilizers. It's more work. But they can replace synthetic fertilizers, which use oil, which is a problem in another way. Finally, what's really interesting is when you look at the economics of this, right? It's a first world problem. When you live in Kenya or Zimbabwe or Tanzania or Uganda, places I have lived, you realize really quickly that people do not apply a lot of fertilizer to their crops because they can't afford it. Right? And so they're looking at very creative systems, many times manual systems, but creative systems. So the gap is small when it's a developed world problem. It's about an 80% trade-off, 80 to 100%. But as Will said, if you produce sustainably organically, or if not certified, non-certified organic, you can get a better price. And if the difference in productivity is only 20% because you're applying nitrogen in natural ways, you may actually end up ahead. All right, so that's the sort of my little lecture on nitrogen. I hope just breezing through that, I've been able to say it's a problem. It comes in part from agriculture. There are things we can do about it. And if you do them, you're not necessarily going to suffer. In fact, it may be a benefit to do agriculture from the perspective of one of our key pollutants better. I'd like to thank Peter Groffman, Dave Strayer, Stuart Finley, and Laurie Quillen. As I said, this was a talk that 2 years ago I would have not given because I would have felt so uncomfortable. But now I stand on the shoulders of giants. Right? Peter Groffman is the world's expert on nitrogen. He was at Carring's for 20 years. He's now a senior research fellow and is full-time down at CUNY because he wanted graduate students. He can't go figure. And Dave Strayer is one of the world's experts on not just mussels, but on Hudson River and river ecology, along with Stuart Finley, who's worked on Hudson for 30 years. And Laurie's our director of communications and made this presentation intelligible if it was intelligible. If not, I take all the blame. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are going to transition next into our first panel. And the panel discussion that we're going to have is going to be service providers from this area. So these are people who, from their jobs every day, work with primarily with farmers. And so we wanted to have them here so that you could have an opportunity to see them, meet them, and hear from them as to what is it that they hear every day when farmers come into their offices, what are their challenges, If farmers want to go towards a regimen that is more friendly to keeping nitrogen, why can't they just do that? What are the things that the farmers are facing? And so if our panelists can come up, that's Mick Basier, Dave Riffenberg, and Jason Dempsel. You guys come take a seat. If anyone has any burning questions while they're getting themselves settled, I know we've been sort of talking to you a lot. Does anyone have any questions you want to ask now before we get to the end? One quick thing, can you all raise your hands just so we know who the audience is here? How many of you are landowners? It's pretty much everybody. How many of you are farmers? Okay, so we have some people who are landowners and farmers here. We have some people who are one or the other. So hopefully we'll have a little opportunity later on to have more of a dialogue, but I hope also when we do these panels, the panelists will be asked questions, and at the end are sort of integrated into these panel discussions. It is helpful to have audience interaction, so don't feel like you need to hold all your questions until the very end. I'm generally going to have our panelists introduce themselves, but I'll at least tell you who they are. I can't quite reach you to get close enough. So Dave Riffenberg is with Farm Credit. We work with them a lot. I'll let him tell you who they are, but it's essentially a lending institution that's used by a lot of farmers, so they have probably more interaction from a financial perspective of farmers than probably any other institution that's in this room at least. And Mick Basier, I never know what your expertise is because Mick is an expert in everything. He's with a cooperative extension, so he's been their vegetable science person, their animal science person, and is a wealth of knowledge. He's been there for, I'm not sure how many years, but 17 years. And then at the end is Jason Dempsel. So Jason found his farm through one of the farms that the Columbia Dutchess match program helped to put together. We knew the landowners, and then he actually took over a lease from a farmer that we helped to put on that property. So he comes to us from that perspective, and he's also with Ulster County Cooperative Extension. And so Josh is going to be moderating the questions for the panelists. Hopefully you can pass the microphone back and forth because this one I don't think it reaches. Oh, it's mobile. Okay.
So why don't we have him, why don't you just take like 2 minutes to talk about what you do, sure, and how that relates to this issue of farm to lease.
Okay, super. Well, hello everybody. Thanks for inviting me down. My name is Dave Riffenberg. I work for an organization called Farm Credit East. Farm Credit East is an agricultural co-op that deals with lending and financial service work. We're certainly a little bit different and unique than, say a normal, the key banks in the local sector. We're part of a national system of co-ops that was initially formed and chartered and overseen by the government, but it is a private for-profit business. So we control most of the Northeast, and there's farm credit all across the country. So everyone that deals with our organization in some way, shape, or form is agriculturally related, right? Full-time farmers, part-time, farm-related businesses, etc. So I've been with the company 22 years, mainly in credit. And credit encompasses a lot of things between land purchases and equipment, etc. The last couple of years I've been in there in the services department dealing mainly with income tax work, farm business consulting work as far as succession planning, generational transfers, that kind of thing. So we do a wide range of things in addition to credit. So again, thank you for having me here. If there's any questions, certainly we'd be happy to have them as we go.
Hi folks, it's nice to see this bunch here today, good group of folks. I work with the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene counties. Kind of like something in the neighborhood of Hank Kimball was on Green Acres, if you remember that. I get to go out and tell folks to check their soil, and I also know all the government holidays. I get to work with the producers, what I call the 6 P's of agriculture, and somewhere within that range, I get to do something in that range every day, just about. First is planning, then procuring, producing, processing, promotion, and then passing it around, or distribution. The D didn't fit very well. So anyway, I do a little bit of all of it. I enjoy one segment of my work more than some of the others. I get to do grazing plans for folks in up and down the Hudson Valley. And I've done 80 or 85 or somewhere in that of those, and I enjoy doing that the most. I'm also a landowner in 5 states and have dealt with the very thing that you all are dealing with for both sides of the fence. So I understand this issue very well. And I get to recommend certain things to some people. And the first thing that I tell people is that it's easier to match your operation or whatever plans you have to the resource you have, rather than try to fit the resource to fit your operation. So studying the land, and I brought with me what I call the Bible. Every county has a soil survey book. It's been put out by USDA, started in the 30s and in the 50s and in the 70s and added to it. But it's like a Bible. It's inspired work, lots of different writers, but it tells us a little bit about the soil's resource, the basic resource, this life mantle that we have to work with on this planet, and what the land is capable of doing and what it's best suited for doing. And that's one of the things to match whenever we're trying to get together with those folks. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you, and I'll see if I can answer anything. I'll try.
Thanks, Vic. Okay. My name's Jason Detzel. I have been at Cornell for less than a year, like Mick, who's been here 17 years. And I'm the triple play because I got my land through Columbia Land Conservancy from a fallow farm that kind of had some issues domestically and gave up. I also am a beginning farmer on a ranch in Hudson, New York, and I work for Cornell in Ulster County. The thing that I'm really encountering now, and what Cornell has realized, is that there is a massive influx of new farmers in this area with a lot of imagination but not implementation. And so our job is really to kind of grab those dreams and bring them down to reality and form them into what they can be, which is a working, sustainable farm. Sustainable doesn't just mean for the land, but also means making money, so you can raise a family on that. I sit in the middle of the office and I can hear these people come through the door, and I can hear the enthusiasm in their voice, and I know they want to farm, I can feel it, I can smell it, I just want to harness it. So Cornell has now hired a team of maybe 4 or 5 new employees that are taking over some of the people that are leaving in the near future as a kind of progressive front, using progressive and sustainable techniques to focus those folks into the farming practices that we are going to feel are most profitable and most sustainable for our area. That includes pasture-based systems, really taking a good look at the economics, like I mentioned before, this huge sink of food called New York City that we have here, and doing it right. We've been doing such a good job, in fact, that I think we're having a little overlay in the fact that we're having some flooding of markets now in certain areas. Where I live in Hudson, New York, where some of the more established farms are having difficulty maintaining the CSA numbers and things of that nature. And so that's another side of that business where we're getting more progressive with what we're doing, which is finding new channels for them to market these products overall. And thanks for letting me come today. This is great. I thought you were going to TED Talk. This is awesome. My mom's going to be so proud.
So we have a remarkable set of resources here, and we have 2 panels. One is this panel, which is looking at service providers, then we're going to talk to farmers. So as you think about your question, think about, is this a question that these gentlemen who have decades of communal experience can answer on the question of how we get to farming? And then maybe we can, if you have questions that are more about the farming itself, we can move those to the second panel. So our question here.
To Nick, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, so this is a dumb question, but could you explain to everybody exactly what soil is and how does soil get to soil?
That's a good question. I did a week-long study on that, or program about that a couple of weeks ago. And it took almost 2 weeks to get people to understand it. So it's not my problem, right? Maybe it's the way I explained it to them. Now, the point is that there's several things that make up the soil. And what are the 4 things that we normally think are in the soil? We have minerals, water, we have biological activity, and it takes about 50 or 60 years to make the thickness of a dime. Will Rogers said it one time, he said, buy yourself some land, they're not making any more of it. But we are making a little bit of it all the time through the different weathering activities and geological changes. We're making a little land all the time, and that's where stones grind against each other, or lichen get on rock and deteriorate it. Lots of different ways that we're making soil that we make about 50 years, about the thickness of a dime. So in about 1,000 years, you got an inch. The 3 parts of the soil that we're concerned about the most are to make healthy soil. It's the physical part, which is the structural part, the minerals and the stuff that holds it together. And then we have the chemical interactions, the ionic exchanges, and the cations and anions working together. And the nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, those sort of things that we're talking about all the time. Then we have the part that is sometimes neglected, and we need to probably insert more of it into our philosophy, and that is the biological part. Under the ground, there's tens of thousands of millions of different animals working down there, from bacteria to fungi, nematodes, etc., that are in there working off the organic matter and helping to supply food for the roots of the plants that we're trying to grow. So, in a nutshell, there's the soil. That's 2 weeks condensed down.
There are a stupid question. The whole purpose of this forum is to ask questions that you may not be able to get answered, or you looked on the internet and it didn't make any sense. And my guess is if you're thinking it's a stupid question about it, then people in the room are thinking it's a question. So, other questions?
To follow up on the soil, based on your Bible, this is another question for Will. The soils are designated prime, or what's most important for farming most of the time are the prime farmland soils and statewide important soils. Can you explain what prime are and what statewide important soils are, and are they universal across the whole U.S., or are New York soils different than what you might find in the Midwest?
Well, New York. I need to talk this way. New York soils are all different. Each county, that's why we have all these from every county in the whole United States. That's why I consider it a Bible. It's an amazing amount of information that's put out, or was put out. And all our modern technological advances with GPSs and all that stuff have used this as a pattern to work from. And it's amazing. It really is amazing. I'm inspired, or awe-inspired by the work that those gentlemen did, or ladies and gentlemen, back in the CCC and those days they started this whole thing. But the soils are different from one county to the next. For instance, in Greene County, there's 158 types of soil. And in Columbia County, there's 106. Ulster County, there's 123. And in Dutchess County, there's 118, I think. Dutchess County wouldn't give me one of these. They're real tight with it. So if you want to study the Bible from Dutchess County, you're going to have to know somebody in high court. Anyway, prime soils are the ones we consider. There's 8 different classifications of soil, 1 through 8, based on their capability class. That's what the first thing I look at in the soil is capability class of the soil. 1 is obviously prime in most cases, and it's the best you can get for a combination of where it came from, what type of underlying parent material, how much organic matter it'll hold, and the levelness of the land that it's on. 2s and 3s are generally in the soils of importance, economic importance in the county, in the state. 2s, a lot of 2s are actually prime soils as well, because they just produce a lot. And if they're up to their capability class, that means all the nutrients are in the soil and the pH is right. They're capable of doing a very good job of growing crops. 3s, they can go either way. They're not generally prime, but they're always, almost always, soils of economic importance. And they do a good job. And you can add to them and make them, as, like they say in the Army, the best they can be. They'll do a very good job of raising crops. 4 and 5 are up in the air a little bit. Sometimes we have trouble with 4s and 5s. 6s, even more so. 7s and 8s are generally the side of the mountain with rocks on them. The 7s, sometimes you can get some grass to grow there, and trees particularly. So the best use for 7s and 8s are generally some sort of woodland, or woodlot type operation.
Or, I was going to ask Jason to follow up on
Yeah,
that.
or so my land is like, I don't know, do you know what classification my land is?
Yeah.
The soil's about this thick, and it's rock.
It's 3.
Yeah, okay, it's 3. So the way that we're addressing that is remediation through rotation of grazing animals and ruminants. And you can do a lot of things with ruminant animals because they eat and they poop it out the back end. It looks even better in that end because that feeds the biology of the soil, the biota. What you get through that is increased soil substance. You get better water retention. You get better carbon sequestration. It's a win-win if you do it correctly. You can't just let these animals out there and run rampant. If you do it correctly, you can rebuild these soils on these lands. And what does really well on really steep, rocky soils? Goats, cattle. As you always tell me, cattle have 4-wheel drive. And so that's what we're trying to push when we're looking at making grazing plans. And Nick's actually done 2 grazing plans for me. And funny story, when you first did your first one, I looked at it and I put it on a shelf. And 2 years later, I looked at it and I was doing exactly what Nick had told me to do through trial and error, which was a testament to my stupidity and Nick's genius at the same time. So.
Okay, I was wondering, when you're doing credit, how do you factor in things like soils and or appropriateness of different crops on the land in credit? Is that the farmer's best?
Well, that makes all part of the whole thing.
There you go.
Yeah, it's like my first also.
Oh, sorry about that. Really, it's all part of the process. I would say, certainly we're looking at that. I mean, certainly you're looking at, the capability of the farmer in general, his, technical abilities, but certainly the quality of the land will play into it. As far as what are those, things that go with the land. If it's somebody that wants to do some sort of a vegetable operation or whatnot, is there running water going through there? Is it rocky ground? Is it class 1 soil? All that stuff you're going to evaluate before you kind of make the bet on somebody, I guess.
And, I was wondering, Jason, when you have all these young, eager people, right, who want to come in and, grow herbs for the New York City market or Japanese vegetables or some sort of niche market crop, and they're on, and they're looking at a farm that's really appropriate for sheep and goats. What's the best strategy there?
The way I start out with all that is, when's the last time you bought that, or when's the last time you bought that Japanese thing? Most people will be like, oh, I haven't bought that, I just want to grow it. All right, so let's think about something else. The way to get those people to realize what Nick said, or sorry, you had said before, someone said it, you got to match the resource to the land, and that's what's really important. Also, a lot of people haven't been exposed, many of us haven't been exposed to the wonders of animal agriculture or otherwise. They get that farming bug, but they don't really have the experience. So once you get around animals like I did, you're going to love them. And so one of the techniques we have is to take them out on farm tours to get them used to animals. We'll bring them to my place. Like, hey, why don't you help me do tagging this one day, or just take a walk with the cattle. So exposure is really important. And then once the exposure produces passion, then hopefully passion can produce what we really need to happen on that land. Or we can use maybe more Japanese service. I don't know.
What about here and with that? And I'll go back up to that.
A question to Dave. When large scale programs, incentives are in place, those incentives may reflect science no longer corrected. We now know we shouldn't be incentivizing this crop with this technique. So do you find a match between the ag incentives and the state-of-the-art knowledge of stewarding land?
That's a tough question. Nick, got anything on that? I guess I would just, maybe this is kind of a different way to look at it, but, you know, the folks that we deal a lot with, I would say that the large-scale commercial guys, right, the large dairy farmers, row crop guys, etc. The guys that are in business in this part of the world are really sharp operators. You know what I mean? I think everybody would be astounded, and I see it all the time, and I'm always astounded by it. The technical ability and just the pure smarts these guys have to have in order to operate a large commercial farm. You know, and all farms, but in particular some of these large farms. So, you know, it's in their best interest to be good stewards of the land, right? And they live and breathe, and it's their livelihood and their family heritage, etc. You know, whatever incentives I think that they do obtain to help keep them in business, I certainly don't fault anyone for doing that, because they are good stewards of the land, and it's their best interest to do the best job they can with the land. If that answers your question, probably not. But
yeah, quick question. If a landowner has, let's say, 30 or 40 acres, hypothetically, and they want to do an evaluation as far as what they have before they start the process, you mentioned things like soil survey, other things like topographical maps, etc. Essentially, if you want to self-evaluate before you take any steps, what are the major things you would do, and is that going to cost you $10,000 to $20,000 to do all these various tests and evaluations?
Before you answer, can everybody hear the questions, or should we repeat? No, up in the back. So, can you briefly repeat the question before you answer?
What should you do to learn about your land a little bit more before you get involved in making deals one way or the other? Is that basically what the question was?
Right, and essentially,
how can I learn about it?
How can I learn what I have before I even start the process? And how much ballpark is it going to cost me to learn?
Yeah. Okay, well, ballpark, if you have a computer, that's one thing you can start with. The web soil survey is an excellent way to delve into what you have. It takes a little bit of navigating to get through, to learn how to do it. And you have to be able to draw a cursor around the property value, around your perimeter. And then it will tell you what type of soils you have. Then you refer back to the Bible, and it'll tell you how much you can grow potatoes or corn. Trees are a really good crop in this part of the world, and people overlook that as the undercrops. But some of the soils and some of the places we have, a woodlot is actually one that you can bank on. Every year it's 9% growth. So what other investment do you have that does that? 9% every year. But anyway, check back with your local cooperative extension, with your soil and water conservation district. These are public servants, and they're here to talk to you about this stuff and give you as much advice as they can. And it's usually pretty much free, except when you have to pay the tax bill.
So we got one more answer to your question, then a follow-up.
I just wanted to respond to your question also. Just for those of you who may not already be enrolled in the Columbia and Dutchess's Farmer Landowner Match Program, they're one of the services that program provides. Everybody who signs up for that program will create soil maps of the property for you that you can see, and that'll do sort of generic lumpings of whether or not your property is prime or statewide important, kind of give you an idea. And then we also have farmer volunteers. So in addition to working with Cooperative Extension, Will is one of our volunteers. Barry Chase is up there next to Peter. Are both volunteers who can come out to your property and take a look. They're not necessarily going to do the soil test for you, but can take a look as well, so that you can have somebody to talk to you and kind of help you through the process of understanding your soils and understanding your property a little bit. So, Just for those of you not engaged in the program, that is a free service that we provide as well.
She answered. That's why I was going to jump in. Question up in back?
I just had a question about soil maps. So when we do like ag exemptions, you have to turn in your soil map. That's just for exemptions, or is it also when people are paying their taxes that they factor in?
So it's a question about soils, ag exemptions and taxes, and Jason or Nick, I'm sure all of you are
Okay. The ag assessment for property value reduction is based on the soil type that you have on your place. The Soil and Water Conservation District will do a soil inventory to determine what those soils are, and it's a state number that is attached to the type of soil you have, rather than a county number that the assessor attaches to it. And so you have to go through the soil and water and get a specific map, or not a map, but an inventory of the types of soil and what capability class they are and that sort of thing. But it's every year about February we start getting a lot of those. But March is the deadline, March 1st. So February, a lot of soil inventories are being done, and the soil and water folks, I send them right over there to them, and they do it very quickly, very nice.
Okay, well, will that affect credit quality of soil, so that when you get somebody who's trying to do one of these match programs, you know, everybody, I guess, would like to grow organic vegetables and sell them at a high price in New York City, but not all land is, as Nick said, some of it's just that this black walnut on a waiting center. So does that affect the credit structure as well, and interest rates?
Well, it doesn't affect. Sorry. I wouldn't say that. I mean, I wouldn't say the land quality necessarily affects any of those things. I mean, it just goes into, again, you're assessing the technical and marketing skills and whatnot of someone. You know, you're going to maybe, look at it that much deeper if you've got someone you think, if he wants to grow vegetables where there's no water and there's class 5 soil, well, that tells me something right there.
Other questions?
Follow up on this question about the soil type. Clarify, if you would, if your soil is poor, is it correct that there's a greater tax exempt advantage than if your soil is better? If your soil has high value, does that mean that your property has a higher value and the assessor will rate it as a greater advantage of having poorer soil for tax exempt?
That works.
You're going to pay less tax on the poor soil. Yes. That's just, it's got a graduated price range that goes from, most of the land in this part of the world is valued at $1,000 or less an acre. And it goes down to $200 for some acreage, some land. So yes, your question, the way you stated it, is the answer as well.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question for Jason. It sounds like you became involved in sort of the farm just through, finding out about it and sort of trading, bartering, whatever. So can you give a little more of a personal idea about it, given that, we're a farm owner, we're landowners and not farmers, and sort of want to be interested in maybe, how you came about doing that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, you're interested in knowing how to vet possible farmers on your land, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how to answer that. That's a very personal question. I have a passion for farming that grew out of my passion for biology. I was a social worker and a psychologist working for the Air Force for many years, and I met Joel Salatin. And this guy can talk to you all day long, and he talked to me all day long, and this passion grew and grew and grew until I found this land and moved up here. I think the biggest thing you're going to look for in a farmer is, do you believe what they're doing? And like the technical assistant questions. If you don't understand what they're saying, find someone that does and run it by them. You don't need to drill that person about it, but you have all these references sitting right here that you can make that call to CCE and say, hey, this person wants to grow Japanese herbs on this part of land. And then be like, well, does that make sense to you? That's what the professionals are for. As far as, think about any other business you would pick a partner for. Do they have a passion for it? Do they have a drive? And what they say is what they say making sense to you. Does that answer your question? I can't really answer that. It's very difficult. But if they talk like me about what they want to do, then you can probably trust them.
There's a lot of new people that are coming into the area on waterside farming, looking for land and whatnot. Is there a scale, minimum scale that they need to establish before they can do anything that's really viable? I'm sure we have people in here that own hundreds of acres of land and other people that own tens of acres of land. Is there a market for all of that?
Well, that's about matching your resources to your land, right? So, yeah, if you're going to go the Japanese herbs, you need an acre. But if you're going to run cattle, I have 100 plus. So that's all about that match. So, yeah, and the soil type, and the soil, the way it's, if it's hilly or not. Do you guys want to speak on this? There you go.
Maybe I shouldn't make any comments, but I do see a lot of the folks you're talking about. Young, especially young folks coming in, and they, again, I probably shouldn't make these comments, but they have a lot of a lot of dreams, right? And it's tough for folks to separate a dream from a business, and that's kind of what I run into a lot, where it's, folks want to come in and they want to provide the world with good, nourishing food, which is a great concept, but you need to do it on more than a quarter acre of land. You know what I mean? It's where I've got a lot of folks that have a tough time getting their hands around what kind of scale do I have to be, and it has to be a business. At the end of the day, I don't care who's on somebody's land. If you want them to stay there long term and farm long term, it has to be a business, and it has to make money. And I see a lot of the disconnect there, because I think folks want to farm, they love the idea of farming, they don't have a grasp of it needs to be a profitable business. That's
Make one more comment. We call these folks homecomers. The people that are new coming back to the land or never been on the land before. Jason's a homecomer. He's one of them. Anyway, the idea being that they have a need somehow in their mind that they have to be doing this. It need to be tempered with a little bit of education all the way through the whole process. They need to study carefully whatever enterprise they're trying to do, network with other people that are doing it, study voraciously, study the resource. What has been traditionally done on that land before them is another one to study. And just, make it your ideas not in the clouds, but down on the ground where it actually counts. And the homecomers is what I was trying to say. And it took me that long to say.
Jason is a homecomer.
Yeah, as a homecomer, I'm in my 4th year now, and I've been scared of numbers for those 4 years. And it's true. And farming is a difficult enterprise, especially for someone who's new to business. I've never run my own business. And I'm just starting to get a grip on that now. I think that without a mentor, without a legacy, someone behind me or a father or whoever helping me out, running these numbers and doing the things I'm doing differently, it's been an experimental process. And I haven't made a lot of money yet. But I've got the resources now that Cornell trusts me enough to advise others to do so. And I'm figuring out how to do it on my own land. So.
Woman in the green, come to the back. And that will be our last question, and then just I'll state, it's a great panel. They'll be here over coffee, and part of the idea here is to, so Marissa wants to jump in. Part of the idea is to ensure that you get to know all the people in this farmer program.
Yeah, I don't know if Tim wants to. I just wanted to add, because we teach entire workshops on your question of how do I find the right farmer. So we're not going to cover that today, but I would say that, and Tim added here, I would say a really, really important thing to keep in mind is to understand what your goals are. There is no textbook that says X goes to Y. It's really a matter of understanding you and your property and what is it that you want. Do you want your property to serve as a place where a new and young farmer can come in and maybe they'll fail, but they'll learn, and you'll help them learning throughout the process? Or is your goal, I want to have a highly successful vegetable operation on my property, and I want to be a financial partner. Or is your goal, all I really want to do is get my agricultural assessment? Understanding what it is that you really want is going to be key to helping you figure out who and what is the right type of farmer and farm operation. And both CLC and Dutchess and the broader Hudson Valley Network can spend a lot of time with all types of landowners, and we're certainly happy to talk to you to kind of help you get to that point. There are a lot of tools out there to help you figure out. You may not know what you want, but try to help you ask some questions, answer some questions that kind of get to that point that you're comfortable understanding what it is that you're looking for. Sometimes you find that just by talking to a whole lot of farmers, and like you said, do you trust them? Maybe you don't care what kind of operation, but you just want the right farmer. So going through the process of talking to farmers, learning about your land can really help you get to a point where you can make a decision. I don't know if
I would just add to that, and I would back up the idea that, I think two really important things are, one, trying to understand that physical aspect of your property, and there are a lot of resources people to help you with that. Two is those personal goals, and again, resources and folks out there to work with you on those two things. Just like we want farmers to come in with a plan, it's really helpful for landowners to understand what they have and what they're looking for. So knowing the resources that are in the room or available out there for you to do those two things is really important. And then I guess the fourth, as you're talking to those farmers, you're going to be assessing some of the business plan and other experience they're bringing with them, as well as some other aspects, but also your relationship with them. And that'll go back to knowing what your property has to offer and knowing what you're looking for is going to be really helpful for understanding both, like, do they seem like a good fit, but also how's the rapport, what relationship are you looking for, etc. And I think that relates a little bit to the farmers, which is, it's okay maybe for a farmer to be on a smaller property if they're also bringing in off-farm income, and this is part of stepping up into future growth or something like that. So there's a lot of variation. Just being on a smaller property or whatever their production plan might be isn't the only factor to consider. You want to think about their business plan and their experience, but also what other aspects they might be bringing to the table. And again, I would say for all of that stuff, there are folks for every aspect, from building relationships to understanding your property to looking at business plans, who can assist you kind of one-on-one. And I would encourage you to reach out. If you're not sure who to go to, somebody here in this room is a good person to reach out to as a first step, and they can probably help direct.
So I did call the lady in the back. Is your question still relevant? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I just wonder, would a landowner expect to have to put some, would there be a plan for a landowner to have a farmer come in and say, put a fence or condition the soil, or something that they would expect some expense to it as well to work with the farmer?
So I'll rephrase the question. So that it's a partnership. And how is the financial side of that structured in terms of the landowner's investment versus the farmer's investment? Is that a good summary?
Really capital improvement.
Capital improvement, yeah. Land improvement, and so on.
Every farm is different. Every single partnership is different. Every contract we sign is going to be different. In my personal case, my landowners are put in zero money, but they also take a significant ag assessment on their tax. They get a lot of money taken on their taxes every year from me being there. That being said, they're also very supportive and want to be part of the farm as much as possible, physically and business-wise. They like being part of it. Their kids are there. They see the cattle. They show the pictures to their friends. So every contract is different. That's completely up to you if you want to be a partner or not.
So I'm going to say that's a great answer. The answer is it all depends. I want to let Becky wanted to say a couple words, and then I want to thank our speakers.
So just want to, jumping back to the soils, everybody should know whether you have prime and important, statewide important soils on your property, because I think of them as like similar to an endangered species. There are less and less of them all the time. They're the most developable soil. That's where the developer is going to put their development first. That's where people are going to build first. It's the flattest land. It's the easiest to dig. So know what, if you have those on your property, think about that and try to protect them, because as we've heard, it takes a long, long time to create soil, and these soils that we use to grow our food, to where our farms are able to produce the most, are really critical for our own sustainability as people.
We have, can I interrupt a second? We have a situation here in eastern Dutchess County, which is sick. I'm speaking continuous corn. I can see 3-foot gullies on these hillside, prime soils that are hillsides. And this guy, every year, puts the same continuous corn, which of course leads to erosion. 3-foot gullies at the end of the year. He comes in with a bulldozer and bulldozes the gullies down the next season. It's absolutely sickening. So people that are renting their land, first of all, decide if you're going to let your land be used by a small farmer who cares, or one of these factory farmers that farms thousands of acres and is looking for short-term profits only. Have the non-conscious to do something like that to the land. This guy rents thousands of acres from Armenia down to Dover. And then I don't know about the practices, but I guess the same situation of a factory farmer that straddles Pine Plains and Columbia County who hogs thousands of acres in Milliken through Pine Plains. So none of the small farmers can get any land because these guys grab it all. I don't know, they get their name in there as soon as somebody, the land changes hands. They're doing these horrible farm practices. So I would urge landowners to decide what kind of care they would want their tenant to give their livestock. Are they a factory farm that has 1,400 cows cramped in the barn that are never grazing? Are they going to let them put the same damn crop in every year that's going to erode the soils? Look at what they're doing. Investigate them as to not only how many years of experience they have, but these guys have tons of experience, but this is what they do. I've seen this firsthand. It's absolutely sickening. Every year, a bulldozer comes in and fills the gullies.
Well, this all goes back to trust, right? So get to know who's going to be on your land first and foremost.
And I think that's a great place to end. This is, what you do with your land is important to you. It's important to your party. And what's great is we have resources here to help out small farmers, and you give alternatives, and I really appreciate it. And I really like the next